Hello and welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Azam Khan. Ramadan, the holiest time of the year for Muslims, is just around the corner. It is a time of reflection, prayer, and community. During the last few years with pandemic restrictions, this was disrupted for the hundreds of thousands of Muslims in the city. There are also over 33,000 students from ethnic minority communities in the city. And with the pandemic restrictions now in the rearview mirror, they, along with everyone else, can now resume normal education and social life again. My guest today plays a key role in both education as well as ethnic minority community in the city. He is vice principal of a secondary school and honorary secretary of the Federation of Ethnic Communities of Hong Kong, Dr. Rizwan Ullah. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Ullah.
Wa alaikum salam, Azam.
Thanks for coming on. Can you talk about, now that Ramadan's around the corner, and what that means for many observing this time of year, especially compared to last year with all the restrictions?
Well, I think definitely as a Muslim, we are all excited about the Ramadan this year, because in the past 3 years, we have gone through the pandemic, and there were a lot of restrictions with our fasting practices, in particular, where we can congregate and pray our Taraweeh. And with this new era now, I think all the Muslims in Hong Kong are super excited that they can, get into the normal way of having their Ramadan.
Community is a big aspect for the celebration of Ramadan. So what were the things that you learned during that time, especially as a community leader?
Well, I think the most important thing is we can't take things for granted. We have been used to everything in status quo. Also, there were other difficulties when we want to offer our, namaz. The other time of the namaz, and all the masjids were closed. So we learned to be more adaptive, resilient, and also really demonstrate the essence of, perseverance in light of COVID restrictions, how we can go around that and continue to go with our fasting.
Right.
So it was challenging, but I think it also gives us a deeper sense of reflections in the process.
And as someone who's involved in the city, in the public sector, as well as in the community, could you talk about the importance of the cohesion between both of that, the cohesion between the government and the different ethnic minority communities? And I know during the pandemic time, for example, the mosque was used as a place for vaccines and for promoting the different restrictions, understanding. I came to visit one of them as well during that time, and different government officials were there to help promote that. So can you talk about the importance of that and what that looks like in the city?
Well, I think to start off with an ironic note, the COVID-19 virus was not a racist virus. It was very inclusive. It got everyone infected, and it did not discriminate between anyone. So we have to have our own protection and be protected. But when the fifth wave of outbreak was there, it hit Hong Kong very hard. I still remember it was literally a year ago. And during that, all the communities, regardless of our religious background, our beliefs, and our way of thinkings, we get together and try to see what we can offer in the fifth wave. And I still recall with a friend of mine like Nixie and a few others, we were looking at the vaccination issue. Like in particular, like a lot of people were complacent, or they were skeptical about getting vaccination, the question about the effectiveness. So we look at our numbers and we found that we can do something here, and we approached the government.
Right.
And the government was very responsive, very supportive, and came down with us, and quickly we devised a plan to have a vaccination program in Kowloon Masjid last March. And our focus, was to get more of our female sisters to get vaccinated. And not only that, we also as Muslims, we take the opportunities to invite other people who don't know about Islam to get vaccinated.
It's a cultural exchange.
A cultural exchange, and a lot of high-ranking government officials came on that day to visit the masjid, and then they get to know more about Islam. And also, it was not a, like a mysterious place people would go. Like before, like people wouldn't even get in.
Right.
But then with this vaccination, we open up our religion.
Break barriers.
And people can come in freely, and then people get to know more about our religion.
Right.
And I remember, like after this event, now Hong Kong is facing, the shortage of workforce and labor, and we had other activities, large-scale events organized after, that March vaccination, and we open up and tell the community, like Muslims has been in Hong Kong for long enough time, and we are also part of the contributing end in the community. And I think the moments of truth that I had, from the vaccination drive, not only the government people were there, we had volunteers from Friends of Scout, like the uniform group, and then we have also police volunteers.
Right. The rugby union.
The rugby union as well. So you were there, like it was pretty much like
all walks of life,
happily fighting the unracist COVID together.
It's not racist, but there is definitely there's an imbalance on access to information, right?
Yeah.
So that was something that you guys had to keep in mind and getting that information. And I think that's the same thing goes for the Youth Development Blueprint plan that came out late last year that I'm sure you're well aware of. And I had on Ricky Chu, who's the head of the Equal Opportunities Commission, and you sit on the board of that as well. And he mentioned the importance of understanding that the access to the information from the blueprint, the different platforms, and the different information from it, it's important for that information to be also equally given out to different communities that maybe not be able to access it. So can you talk about the importance of that, and if there's anything that you try to do?
Well, I think at the age of information, we are overwhelmed with information. And then with social media and the use of different, devices or apps that we use, sometimes a simple information can become way complicated. And then as, community leaders, we try to see how we can effectively convey the information which can actually contribute to subsequent actions. So like for the Youth Development Blueprint that you talk about, so the government has actually, as I know, has conducted at least 30 school visits, and they have lined up many more in the coming few months so that they can articulate the vision that, when the chairman came to Hong Kong, the president told about his vision, like, if you want the country to do better, the youth has to do well. And looking at how we want our youth to go, ethnic minority youth, they are also an integral part of Hong Kong society. So with the 160 measures in the Youth Development Blueprint, we are looking at, secondary school students, students in university, and young people who are actually working now or want to seek on entrepreneurial pathway.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of these resources there, and then this Youth Development Blueprint actually is synchronizing everything. And then there's the Youth Development Commissioner the Youth Commissioner is looking after this important task. And like last month, we had conducted one session in one of the madrasas in Kwai Chong, where we had a lot of participants to learn about the Youth Development Blueprint. Right. And I think the proactive approach is important, and also have to look at some creative element as well when we want to convey some information.
You think it laid a good foundation, the blueprint, and it was like, what was your general
Well, I think it was a good start. Because you get to consolidate different bureaus, what they are working. Their area of work with which is relevant to youth work. So there, as I've said, those 160 measures are not something like new.
Right.
It's actually some of the measures, and then they were packaged, refined, and then presented in a way that cater for different groups
Right.
of the developmental stage of the youth. So when you look at that blueprint, you see the vision. Like as youth, you will be able to see the government concerned about you. Like recently, like a day before, in the conclusion of the 2-session meeting, the word youth is mentioned again.
Right.
So you see, like down the line in the coming years, youth work will continue to play an important role. And then as I'm in the education field and also very active in our own community, we have to see how to get our youth.
How for it also to impact the non-ethnic Chinese community as well.
Of course, because we are not a segregated element or an auxiliary unit in Hong Kong society. We are part of this, and we are part of the fabric. So in that regard, we have to look at whenever we do things or have some initiatives, we have to, intrinsically or even like subconsciously is a norm. Like in this studio, we have 2 ethnic minority and 2 Chinese fellows here in this studio.
That's true.
So we work perfectly fine. So I believe our youth, this is how we should go down the line. We should not be treated specially, but the organizers or people who run activities have us in mind and see how we can facilitate and do some cultural responsive arrangement.
I'm going to pause you right there while we take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Dr. Rizwan Ullah. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Talk the Walk. I'm speaking with Dr. Rizwan Ullah, Honorary Secretary of the Federation of Ethnic Communities of Hong Kong. Dr. Ullah, I want to talk about the importance of language proficiency, specifically Chinese language. In this city, it's crucial. That's something which remains a barrier for non-ethnic Chinese students in Hong Kong. And as someone who grew up here, as someone who is proficient as Chinese, can you talk about the importance of that and how far along that has come in the city?
Well, I think what I've learned from my elders is that in any place you live, first thing you must learn is the language. And learning a language itself is not easy, okay? Some people might be very talented and some might not. Some can grasp the language very easily and some might experience difficulty. And I think the key thing, Hong Kong is a very unique place. I always view, for our ethnic minority friends, the youth, to be in an advantageous spot. Because given the fact that if they speak good English, they speak their mother tongue, and then they can speak Cantonese and even have some grasp of knowledge of Putonghua, they can...
it adds to a character. Yeah,
they can develop very well in Hong Kong, in GBA, because you can see it, for example, like let's say speaking about the Pakistani community, we have a lot of Pakistani youths in Hong Kong. They speak English, they speak Urdu, they speak Cantonese, and if they learn Putonghua as well, they can take advantage of One Belt, One Road and a lot of these development. I understand that Chinese language is difficult.
But it's the access to the language which is the more the barrier than them being able to understand it or grasp it. And I think, would you say now it's better, there's more access to that for non-ethnic Chinese students? Because sometimes that's difficult for, in schools at those times, it was difficult for them to be taught it. I don't think they were even being taught it by some teachers. But has that dynamic changed?
Well, Azam, if I go back to my time, I studied English and French. And like among our friends, we always joke, like why do we speak better Cantonese than the generation now? And because at our time, we were not required to learn Chinese. And then we try to, find out the reason, like why.
Yeah.
And the reason was very simple. We integrate and we immerse into the local culture. We played football, and in football, you have to play with different people, and then from that immersion, apart from the game, you also have to use the language, and you gradually pick up the language. At that time, we didn't have technology, okay? At that time, we didn't have so many resources as well, and we are able to learn as we go. And now, government put a lot of resources, okay? Undeniably, a lot of resources, a lot of money.
But because back then, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, back then there are a lot of schools which were mostly non-ethnic Chinese kids. And then their learning Chinese was not often given or opportuned.
Chinese was there, okay? But the question was whether, depending on the language ability of the students, there were effective curriculum in school and effective pedagogies in place, effective assessment, and effective environment for the students to learn the Chinese language. And it's most of the time, our kids, they were given an illusion that, or an impression that you can't learn the language.
Right.
I mean, honestly, like, if you ask me, if you learn a language, okay, like let's say, if you ask me, is my English good? I'll just say I can use my English for my need. I mean, if I want my English to be, to a level where I have to use literature and all these things, which is not needed, so I don't have to go so deep. Likewise, for our non-ethnic community, I think the most important thing is they must be able to speak and listen the language. That's basic. And then the second thing, it's able to read. And then it's writing. So we start from having this mindset, and also learning a language is not only in school 8 hours.
It's community.
The community, that's first. Second, have we equipped our students with, self-language learning skills or techniques, which in their free time they can, continue to master the language according to their developmental
On that note,
needs.
I know there are a lot of NGOs now that help provide that after-school classes for those who are not as not as economically fortunate. So they make sure they offer classes for after school to be able to learn Cantonese and Mandarin. Were those things as available back then? Like, how was the general availability of these sort of platforms for non-ethnic Chinese students, young people? And also, on top of that, I want to ask, how was the general collective psyche towards non-ethnic Chinese growing up for you compared to now? Has that changed at all, or the differences that you've noticed?
Well, I'll try to, because this itself can be a few hours program to discuss this.
True.
But I think, in short, I would look at it in this way. I think for ethnic minority communities, our kids, when they learn, they have to learn in a language that they are comfortable with. I personally think, for example, in English for most of the subjects. But then for Chinese language, they have a system where they are able to make progress in the language. And then there should be some effective pull-out programs after school support. And, well, we can consider using some voucher schemes. The government give vouchers to students to go to institutions where they can provide and meet their needs. Because I think the youth now, the language, there's a big diversity. Some are really good. And I know there's a Pakistani girl who is a Chinese language teacher. But those are only handful ones. But at the same time, many of the kids, they feel disheartened, or they don't have that motivation to go and learn more. So we have to strike a balance in this, because learning language itself is fun.
Right.
Okay? And when you learn the language,
you learn about the world more as well.
You learn about more, and that's why, culture is there. You need to learn about the local culture, the way of thinking, and resources are there. And we need to really look at, and there can be numerous studies, why the value of money is not reflected.
Right.
Why so much money is injected? Why, like some of our youth, they find it, they're not improving in the language, because I think like once they finish their secondary school and they go into university, they will still face a problem once they graduate, as their Chinese language competence
right.
at par.
That's right. That's why me personally, I've always wanted to see more non-ethnic Chinese people in the police service or in the public service or in these different sorts of spheres and fields. And I know language is a big issue with that, because otherwise it would, I think it would be very beneficial. It would add diversity to our police force as well. And we have huge communities in Hong Kong which are non-Chinese, so it would serve well in that way as well. As a vice principal of a secondary school here, what are some things that you try to pass on to the students, just in a macro, holistic way, based from your journey and your experience in Hong Kong, growing up in Hong Kong?
Being in the field for 20 years, like I have one strong belief is that I am not teaching subject knowledge to my students. I am teaching them as an individual, how to be holistic, how to develop their whole person development. And the other thing I emphasize is how to accept, respect, appreciate diversity, differences of opinion, differences of thinking. So these are the things that we need to prepare the students for the challenges that they will face when they leave school.
Right.
So I'm a firm believer of these few things.
When or what was it? When was a time that it kicked in for you the drive kicked in for you to serve the community? Growing up in Hong Kong, because that's a big aspect of what you do here, along with your educational side.
I think like the current generation are very lucky. At our time, we didn't have a lot of resources, and we always had this glass ceiling. We always think we can't do it because we have not seen successful cases, and we'll always think small. And there was an opportunity, like I was able to join the teaching field, and then at that time we have a lot of ethnic minority friends, and together with one or two of my friends, we had this foresight, and we saw, like, if we are lucky, and also it's our Islamic teaching as well, we have to give back. So we thought, why not we do something to help? And we actually established an association, Pakistani Student Association at that time, to help, empower, like through education, to empower, integrate our youth
in the community.
And we didn't have, mega funding and all these things. We just had this very clean intention to help.
And it actually helps alleviate external stresses that youth people face in the city, local, Chinese or otherwise. There's always a lot of stress and pressure from studying, from academia, and to entering the workforce. But doing this alleviates a lot of that, would you say?
Well, of course. I mean, in the front line, I can conclude in the past 15, 16 years, we saw a lot of problems. But of course, problems can't be solved overnight. It requires concerted effort. You have to, explain to the government, support the government, explain to the community, get them on board, and try to do. And to have a critical mass, it takes time, but we are along that direction.
Dr. Rizwan Ullah, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you Ramadan Mubarak, and also the viewers Ramadan Mubarak, and also the Muslim community in Hong Kong, Ramadan Mubarak.
Ramadan Mubarak. That's all for this time. Let's see you in the same time next week. Goodbye.